Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an insane Karen demanded I give her my first class seat on an airplane and punches me when I refuse. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Karen demands my first class seat, punches me when I refuse. So I ended up crossing paths with a Karen in probably the worst place it could have happened. Halfway through my flight with no ability to just walk away from her. I travel a lot for work, and the way my company does things is a little bit weird. They keep track of how many points I've racked up flying, and then when I reach a certain amount and qualify for an upgrade, I end up getting to ride in first class. I've never heard of another company doing things like this, but it doesn't really matter for this story. Anyway, I was able to be in first class and enjoying a trip from Arizona to Tennessee. In total, roughly a 4-hour flight. I was enjoying myself with a snack and a soda. I don't drink on the flights just because I'm technically still on company time, but then this woman just walks into first class and looks around like she's looking for somebody. Then her eyes land on me and the problems begin. Karen, you, get up! Me, what? Karen, I said get up, or do you not understand English like half of these other foreign idiots on this plane? You look too poor to be here anyway. You must give your seat to a valuable, rich member of society like me. Me, I understand what you said. Why are you telling me to get up? Karen, because I need your seat. I spent almost 2 hours back there and I needed more space. You're not up here with anybody and can swap seats with me. Me, I'm not giving you my seat. I don't even think you're supposed to be up here. Karen, oh please, people switch all the time. I'm aware that sometimes a family will get one seat in first class and the rest in business or economy, and then the parents might switch mid-flight. However, I did not know this lady and assumed she was just drunk or something. I tried to hit my call button and make contact with a flight attendant as subtly as I could. I had a bad feeling and just knew that she was gonna be trouble. Me, I don't want to give up my seat. Before she could say anything else, a flight attendant showed up and asked what was going on. Karen, she won't get out of my seat. She asked for tickets, which I showed, and Karen refused and claimed I stole her tickets as well. Even though it had my name on it and they knew I was there the entire time. Flight attendant, this is her seat. I need you to return to your assigned seat. Karen, it smells back there. I demand to be upgraded to first class. Flight attendant, as you can clearly see, first class is full. The entire flight is booked and I need you to take your seat. She was not stopping though and demanding again that I get up. The flight attendant realized that Karen was not gonna listen, so she called for backup to try and get Karen away. This did not sit well with Karen and she decided that she was gonna make a horrible decision at this point. She grabbed me by the shirt and tried to force me out of the seat, as if getting in meant that it was gonna become hers and there was nothing they could do about it. I was so scared out of my mind being grabbed and pulled and struggled to get out of her grasp. Then a fist connected with my stomach and I got the wind knocked out of me. It felt like a long interaction, but it probably was only 5 seconds total. I'm 5 foot tall, 105 pounds, Karen had both height and weight on me, so it really hurt like hell. Then I saw 2 big guys that were sitting in first class and saw the entire thing, holding Karen back. Of course she was screaming that she was being assaulted even though she was the one who threw a punch. More flight attendants were also there trying to get zip ties around her wrists to restrain her. They managed to get zip ties on her hands, but she was still trying and going crazy. At this point they managed to get her on the ground where she flailed her legs and even managed to kick the guys holding her. Karen was not calming down and deciding to make things worse, starting to shout threats, which on a plane is the worst kind of thing you can do. We take things very seriously on airplanes here in America, and they have to take every threat as serious and credible as possible. What that meant for Karen was that she was gonna remain restrained for the rest of the flight until we landed. She was dragged back to her seat and secured to it. I never got to see what she looked like, but based on other online photos and videos, it was probably hilarious. I had staff and others in first class checking if I was okay and getting me some water. I was physically okay, just very shaken by the entire experience. I spent the rest of the flight a little nervous about her breaking out of the restraints or something and coming back to hit me again. Luckily that didn't happen and things were calm until we landed back down. Not quiet, as even in first class we could hear Karen occasionally yelling about being abused and having rights. When the plane landed we were all asked to remain seated. Emergency services of police and EMTs boarded to get Karen off before anybody else. EMTs also checking on me to make sure that I was okay before going to check Karen. Then the police told me that after I got off the plane, they wanted to take a statement from me about what happened. Karen was removed from the plane and screaming more than ever now that she realized that she was getting arrested. I have no idea where she gets all this energy to yell for basically 2 hours. We finally got to leave the airplane and I met with the police to give them my statement about what happened. I was curious what would happen to Karen since I've never seen something like this happen before, and they told me not to worry about Karen and she was gonna be prosecuted for what she did. Between the multiple eyewitness accounts and statements, they were talking that it would be an open and shut federal case. Between waiting in the airplane and speaking to police, I was 3 hours late for my work meeting. Luckily, the story of what happened was enough to not make anybody mad at me for being late, and yes, the landing time and meeting shouldn't be so close together, but the company plans that, not me. Anyway, I looked into it because of course the news got a hold of the story of a woman being taken off a plane by police. What I didn't know before was that committing a crime in a plane makes it a federal one and way more serious that way. Karen was gonna be charged with multiple things and face fines and time in prison for what she did. I would have to wait longer to get any more information on that, but I did learn that the airline made a statement saying that anybody that gets arrested on one of their flights receives a lifetime ban as well. So even if she manages to get on a plane again, it won't be with this airline. And honestly, I would not be surprised if she ended up on a total no-fly list after the threats she made during her meltdown. Months later, I decided to look up what happened to her just for fun and found out the full extent of her punishment. She ended up with a prison sentence. It turns out that when you hit a flight attendant especially, you are labeled as disrupting the duties of a flight crew member. Which is saying you potentially put every single person on that plane in danger, and on top of that she was fined a few $1,000s for all the trouble she caused on this flight. This was in about 2018, and for a few years I actually forgot that it happened. It was not until I saw a surge of videos popping up online of people during the pandemic not acting right on planes, it made me remember the worst flight encounter I ever had. For your information, I no longer work for that company or fly regularly, so that's probably the craziest thing I will ever have directly happen to me. I just cannot imagine the brainless logic of Karen thinking that she could just swap to a first class seat because she felt like it halfway into the flight and that moving me from it would result in her getting her way. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you've ever met any entitled people on airplanes, then please feel free to share your story in the comments because we would love to hear it. And the next one is titled Malicious Compliance with the Pastor. This happened several years ago, back when I was part of a Christian cult church and in leadership. Also, I'm writing this on mobile, so sorry if it looks funky. Anyways, onto the story. Back when I was 22 and a young, impressionable young adult, I was part of the media team for this church. We were responsible for creating videos and flyers, as well as posting on social media and taking pictures, etc. This was volunteer work, but the pastor, we will call him Pastor Corruption, was an anal, cold-hearted dictator of the religious institution who would often give us last-minute projects that would keep us up all night in order to make a video to play during service the next day. We averaged 3 to 5 hours of sleep per night, but this was while I was in school, so during this time, in order to stay on top of my homework and other projects, I would average closer to 2 to 3 hours per night, and to be honest, I'm not sure how I survived with only having occasional bouts of suicidal ideation and paranoia or delusions. Pastor Corruption loved money. He had a giant 6-bedroom house for himself and his wife, only complete with heated driveways and the latest model Cadillac which sat atop of said driveway. The church building itself was overinflated, which sat close to 1,000 but maybe had a congregation of only 400 or so. More than Pastor Corruption loved money, he loved other people's money. 70% of the sermons were regarding how you needed to give the shirt off your back to the church or else you did not love God and were going to hell. Which is ironic considering that their accountant had been caught embezzling funds in the past. This went beyond tithes, which was 10% of what you make, and included pledges, fundraisers, giving for church events and going to retreats that made a profit from the attendees. Pastor Corruption and his pack of goons, aka associate pastors, who also shamed you for not giving money and being poor, would openly brag about how God blessed them after these rounds of extortion. Well, one day, it is near Pastor Corruption's birthday, and his pack of goons decided that the pastor's car from last year's model was too old and he needed a brand new car. They took a pledge from all the ministry departments to pay for said car. The minimum pledge you were allowed to make was $300 and the media team was no exception. Me, being a broke college kid with a minimum wage part-time job, decided that was impossible and I just was not gonna pledge anything. Well, this led to several hour-long lectures lectures and shaming sessions about how I was seen as a leader. I was not seen at all since I was always working behind the scenes and I needed to set an example. Finally, I got fed up and worn down to the point that I confessed that I couldn't pledge because that would be taking all my rent money. I lived with some other leaders from the church at the time and shared a room with another girl. $300 does not seem like a lot now, but at the time, for not even having my own space or a place for my bed, this was highway robbery, especially for a broke college kid. A girl who lived with me, who was also lecturing me, told me just pledge the money anyway and I can pay rent later. Welp, I was coerced into giving the $300 for Pastor's corruption's stupid car, and now he had 2 brand new Cadillacs sitting in his heated driveway. 3 days after rent was due, the girl who lectured me about pledging comes up and asks me for the rent money. The conversation basically goes like this: I don't have it yet. What do you mean you don't have it? I gave you 3 extra days to figure out something. What am I supposed to do? Pull it out of thin air? Maybe you should be more responsible with your spending. I've spent $2.16 on myself in the last 3 weeks and it was to get a coffee, so I don't crash my car while driving because of a lack of sleep. I will give you until the end of this week, but you cannot expect us to cover you any longer than that. You're being extremely selfish. Now, on top of worrying about juggling projects between school and the church, I need to worry about not getting evicted. Then I come up with a plan. I'll just pawn my laptop. My laptop was brand new since it had just come out recently, and I decided to splurge and buy the latest model when my last 6-year-old laptop took a dump on me a few months before. I used it for schoolwork, but they had labs I could use on campus that would help me get by. However, the other thing I used it for was media projects for the church. You know how Pastor Corruption likes money, right? Well, he did not like spending money, so the media team had a 13-year-old desktop that was overloaded with files, which severely slowed down its already laggy performance and caused it to take several hours to render videos if they didn't fail or corrupt. When I had got my laptop, it was fairly decent at rendering large video files in under 10 minutes and had amazing clarity and graphics, so they had convinced me to switch to using my laptop for all things media related rather than using the decade-old desktop. I did not mind because it didn't interfere with my schoolwork that much, but all the templates for social media and other video and files were on my laptop now, meaning every week I was responsible for getting everything updated and handing off the final versions of the file to the head of the media team. The girls I lived with would help me edit these files when we were home and were the leaders of the media team. This means that all the recent files of projects they needed were on my laptop and no backups were made on the church-owned desktop. I pawned my laptop, got the rent money and paid the leader without saying anything about how I managed to get the money in a single day. Saturday night rolls around, which is usually when we worked on the video files we needed for the next day, and they ask me where my laptop is so we can get started. I don't have it. Where is it? I pawned it. What? I pawned it. Why? I needed to pay you rent. I had no other way to get you the money. I could not afford the pledge, but you graciously gave me an extra 3 days to pay it and make up for my rent I used to pay for the pledge. This is one of the most valuable items I own, so I figured it was the quickest way to repay you. At this point, they start freaking out. They want to go get the laptop out right then and there, but the pawn shop was closed. So they rush to the church and fire up the Dino desktop and desperately try to recreate the videos we needed from scratch. However, they have no backup since mine was being exclusively used and the programs and versions that I was using versus what the Dino had was completely different. Think Adobe CC versus Final Cut Pro. In the end, we did not have anything ready in time for service that Sunday morning, and the entire media team got yelled at by the Pastor Corruption. I got double yelled at by the leaders on the media team, but it was worth it to see them panic. Several months later, I ended up leaving the church altogether and was nice enough to give them all the files of stuff I had on my laptop. My only regret is being so amicable when I left, because F that place and F Pastor Corruption. However, last I heard, most of the people I knew there have left and the church has downsized considerably and moved buildings. I assume they never got a new desktop for the media team after I left. This is one of the many outrageous aspects of this church, but it made me never want to deal with organized religion again, and now I'm mostly agnostic. Edit. Wow, didn't expect so many people to see this post. I hope you all enjoyed this story from my early 20s. It's amazing, but not surprising, how many other religious organizations are just like this. By the way, someone already guessed the organization in the comments, but it doesn't have many upvotes as of now. For all those telling me in increasingly creative ways that I was spineless, thanks for the good laugh. Legitimately, I hope you all don't spend your entire day online making judgments about someone based on a random story. Anyway, just to clear things up, unless you've been through a traumatic event/abusive situation around narcissistic people, you really cannot understand this. I probably could have done more malicious things like exposing them or destroying things, but to someone who felt like they had no power at the time, this was a perfect way to get a little revenge. And yes, it was only a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things, but in front of 400 people and leadership who expected the service to run a specific way, they could barely save face. It was malicious in the sense that the narcissistic pastor took it personally that it reflected poorly on them. But anyways, I digress. And yeah, Ripe Stars, honestly for me, one of the things that is really sad in these church/religion related stories is how people can take advantage of others by abusing religion. And let's be clear, this does not happen everywhere. For many people, the church as a community is a really important place because it gives them a sense of belonging and community, and I can 100% understand that. But seriously, I absolutely hate people who abuse religion to exploit others. And another example of this I've encountered while living here in Asia and traveling around. In some countries, and unfortunately, sadly, it was specifically India, there are so many scammers around all these beautiful temples, and it's really sad that the government seemingly does not do anything to prevent this. If I remember correctly, I think it was in 2018, I was in Calcutta, in India, which is still one of my favorite cities to visit, honestly. It's such a vibrant and energetic city. However, if you want to visit temples there, you seriously need to do some research before going there. If you read the reviews of some of these temples, it sounds like you're going into a slaughterhouse or something. Some people were saying that there are gangs of scammers there who literally force you into rooms and then they make you watch how an animal gets slaughtered or something, and then in the end they want the equivalent of like $50, and if you don't give that, they will intimidate you until you do. But seriously, screw people who try to scam you by using religion. Thankfully, where I grew up in Europe, religious scams are not really a thing there. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. My neighbor has always been an entitled Karen, but things seem to have gotten worse ever since she got pregnant. She thinks that it is the responsibility of me as her neighbor and anybody else she sees to help her with the smallest and most mundane tasks. Some examples of this are putting away her groceries, cleaning her house, changing a light bulb, and even watching and feeding her other kid. Keep in mind that she is married and also is not offering to pay for people to do any of these things. With me specifically though, she keeps saying that she needs us to swap houses until she has the baby because mine will be more comfortable for her. It's a larger house with more amenities and she really thinks she has some right to have it. She went as far as telling me that if she doesn't end up with my house for the rest of her pregnancy, her child would be born with a birth defect and it would be my fault. Obviously, I told her crazy ass that I wasn't giving her my house for the rest of her pregnancy. The good news for me was that one weekend I planned to go out and see two of my friends that I hadn't seen in a while. We all lived a good drive away from each other, and a weekend away from Karen bothering me was gonna be great. Or so I believed. I drove 6 hours to get to his house, and when I got there, I found out that our other friend was sick and could not come at all. Disappointing, but still, I had one friend and we would have a really good time. That only lasted for a couple of hours before he got a call from work. Now he manages a team at his job and it turns out that some chaos has gone down. One of the people on his team was meant to be closing a deal on the other side of the country and flaked on the entire thing. I won't lie and pretend that I fully understood what was going on, but I just knew that he now had to leave and get on a plane to go fix things. After only a few hours, I was back in my car for the long ride back to my own house. My plans ended up being an entire bust and I was tired and grumpy. I left my house extremely early because I like traveling in the middle of the night to avoid traffic. So I'd been awake since about 2 in the morning and was now getting home at 4 in the afternoon. My back hurt, my leg hurt, and I was exhausted. I dragged myself into the house and my kitchen to make myself a much needed cup of coffee. That was when I noticed something was wrong in my backyard. I could see out the window that the pool cover was bunched up near my deck when I knew I had it covered when I left. I went outside to see what happened and found none other than Karen sitting at the edge of the pool with her feet dangling in it. It might have been the exhaustion or my anger for her building up, but I basically exploded at her. Me, what the F do you think you're doing in my pool? Karen, don't you know that water exercises are the best for when you're pregnant? It takes the strain off of the belly. Me, I don't care if it magically gives your baby superpowers. You broke into my effing house. Karen, if you were not a clueless man, you would understand that I needed it. In fact, I think that if we drain all but a little of the water, then in a few months I can have a really nice water birth out here. Me, you are not giving birth in my damn pool. I try and pull her to a standing position so I can properly kick her off my property. I had no idea that she could move as fast as she could with her big belly. She quickly waddled right into my house and up the stairs to my bedroom. I was on her tail, and when I found her, she was in my bathroom, sitting at the edge of my jacuzzi. It was already set up, so she clearly had already been in my house before, which was the final straw for me. Me, that's it. I'm calling the police on your crazy ass. She heard the word police and started freaking out and throwing things at me. At first it was small things like a shampoo bottle, but then she was able to grab my towel rack and chuck it at me. How the hell was this pregnant lady so strong? It hurt too when it made contact with me, and I retreated out of the bathroom to finally call the police on her. She heard me doing it and started screaming bloody murder, that I was trying to kill her baby and she needed to use my things or it would come out defected. She was still going on this cycle of a rant when the police arrived, and I started to explain to them what happened. They went into the bathroom to talk to Karen and see what was going on from her side of things. She actually had the balls to tell the police that I was the one that came in without permission to try and catch her undressing. I already showed the police that this was my address, and they made sure to let Karen know that. She was telling them that she knew it was my address, but because she was pregnant, I allowed her to switch houses with me because she needed the pool and the jacuzzi. I told them, of course, that was a lie, and I had come home to find her in my backyard, and then she ran into the house. She clearly waited until I was going to be gone for a weekend to then break in. In fact, there was a side door with a broken lock that the police discovered, so now I knew how she actually got inside in the first place. Once she was caught, she started complaining again to the police about how I wanted her baby to have an issue. That since she was pregnant, I had to accommodate her needs and let her have my house until the baby was born. They broke it to her that I had no requirement to let her use my house, and she had broken the law by breaking in. When I told them I wanted to press charges, she got even more frantic. Karen, cops, you must not know that it is illegal to arrest a pregnant lady. The handcuffs will cause distress to the baby, and sitting in a cell would cause him to have even more problems once he is born. None of you know the law. She was arrested despite her protests and finally taken away by the police. The charges against her were trespassing, breaking and entering, assault and battery. In court she had the same excuses of being pregnant, and that meant that she was allowed to be in my house and was arrested illegally. She finally ended up behind bars, and I bet it is much less comfortable than if she had just stayed in her own house like she should have. As for me, I'm pretty happy about her being miserable and having her baby in jail after all the crap she pulled. And yeah, ripe stars, imagine if being pregnant gave you the superpower to be allowed to trespass on someone's property and not get any repercussions for it. Thank God we don't live in a society like that. Either way, if you enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously in order to regain a good standing in the algorithm. Thank you so much. The next one is titled, Where Are You From? So this is a very petty revenge. To set the scene, I live in a small European country, and the older generations here can sometimes be incredibly xenophobic, which I really loathe. I'm a linguist, and my husband is pretty into languages as well. We like to speak different languages together for fun and practice. So about 3 years ago we were going home from an event, a theater visit I think, which had us a bit dressed up, think tux and a long dress. We were on the subway because parking in the downtown is hard, and at that time of the day it was faster than a cab when I noticed a total Karen with her husband sitting down right across from us. She immediately gave us a look, apparently disturbed by our attire. My husband kept on talking to me, and in a moment I hear then Karen go, "Can you see them? Showing off their money, effing Russians." This made no bloody sense, like what? I nudge my hubby to pay attention to them. Her husband gives a sigh and reacts, "Honey, calm down, and I don't think they're even speaking Russian." "Of course they are, listen." On cue, I switch languages and hubby follows. We end up keeping the conversation alternating all the languages we can manage. Spanish, Italian, French, German, Japanese, some Serbian, and of course English. I can see the pair listening with rising frustration, quarreling about us the whole time. After about 3 more stops, we get up and we get off the train. The Karen actually gets up and yells after us, "Where the F are you from?" We smile and wave, and my husband shouts back in our native tongue, "Locals, have a nice evening." And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.